Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? It is Geoff Mosher alongside Adam Caplan, and this sort of feels like it's going to be a good news, bad news kind of podcast, Adam. We got a lot to get into. We got some good things to get into. We got some not so good things to get into, and sometimes they fold into one. We'll obviously start with the big news that Eagles head coach Doug Pederson has contracted COVID-19. That report broke Sunday night by our friend Tim McManus of ESPN. You and I have a little bit more information on that. We'll get into it. We're going to try to also get into some of the things that we'll get into some of the things that were said by the assistant coaches this week. They all did their Zooms because those were some important Zooms, I thought. And you and I isolated and alienated a few things that we thought were really interesting. But we'll start it off with what we know about Doug Pederson. Clearly he's got COVID. And Adam, you were going through the language, right, in the agreement. You have it in front of you. I've seen it as well. But it sounds like what we know is that he's asymptomatic. What you were told, correct?
Yes.
Okay?
So I checked into this as soon as you were the one who texted me something and said, "Hey, did you see this story?" And I'm like, "Uh-oh." And I saw it. I'm like, "Okay, I know someone who would know." So, I got confirmed immediately that he's feeling fine. But in Tim McManus's piece for ESPN.com, Doug tested positive twice. So that's obviously a concern that this has happened. And also in Tim's reporting that another staffer got it.
I thought it was just that he was sent home. Did they are they sure that the staffer?
No. The staffer was sent home. Sorry, no. Right. Staffer, you're correct. Staffer was sent home because he was in contact with Pederson. So let's get to that. Pederson did not pass 2 consecutive tests, so he obviously cannot be in the building. The staffer was in contact with Doug. We have no idea if that person could tested positive or not. So thank you for that correction. Now, the question now is, because in McManus's report, I didn't know this part. This is really interesting. It didn't happen. Tim believes that, and what he's heard is that it happened outside the building. Now, the question is, did it happen when he went home? Doug is known as a guy who doesn't really go out, just goes home, sees his wife and his kids. And then you have to use contact tracing here. You have to figure out how he got it. Did someone come into his house and give it? Did the kids get it? Did they see someone who had it? The bottom line is, if the Eagles are positive that he didn't get it in the building, that's actually a good sign.
Sure.
Because if someone brought it into the building and then gave it to Doug, then you got a whole problem. Then other guys could have it. Right. But obviously, Go ahead.
I was going to say they already have to worry about the fact that Lane Johnson, Jordan Mailata, and Nate Gary are on that COVID list. Lane tested positive.
That's the only one out of 3 we know.
That's the only one we know. Right. But so that this, I was just amplifying your point that bringing it into the building when they already have a couple of guys at least on the list is something they were trying to avoid, obviously.
Right. And the Eagles in their statement, which they put out Sunday night, they did what they could. They were honest about it. Quote, "We received confirmation this evening that head coach Doug Pederson tested positive for COVID-19. Pederson is asymptomatic and doing well. He is currently self-quarantined and in communication with the team's medical staff. The organization is following the protocols established by the NFL and the NFLPA. Any individuals in close contact with Pederson at our facility have been notified and will continue with daily testing procedures in compliance with all protocols before we return to the facility."
Right.
It's going to be DUCE Staley, who is going to, according to multiple reports, ESPN and the Inquirer, that DUCE Staley is going to handle the head coaching responsibilities while Doug Pederson is absent. And here's the reason why: he's the assistant head coach. So this is really important. When Deuce got that title, Geoff, typically it's just for money, but this is here you go. Here's the first time where this is very important that Doug gave him that title, and he trusts him. And obviously Jim Schwartz is really the head coach of the defense because he's the defensive coordinator. He's a former head coach, but this is very good we've been talking about this. I put it on our show about a month ago. That defensive coordinator told me, the different team, that he had to have an emergency coach who would take over his defense if he couldn't coach because of COVID. And here we are. It's going to be DUCE STALEY overseeing the team right now.
Right. Who would have thought it would happen this early? The question was posed as what happens during the season if something like this were happen. So the good news is, Adam, is he's asymptomatic. I think you had a source tell you this, and I know I have one tell me that Doug, as recently as I think a Saturday, spoke to the team in a meeting, in a Zoom meeting, and was, giving them the team, get ready for the start of this thing talk, and acting as if everything was fine. So I'm sure Doug felt blindsided by this news as well, because he's feeling well. And the better news is that they've got now, because of the format of training camp, right? The first 2 weeks or so are supposed to be strength and conditioning type days. A lot of the things that were being done, like Zoom sessions, Doug can still do that from his house. I mean, he doesn't really have to be an absentee head coach, so to speak, because he can still have Zoom meetings and talk to the guys and things like that. There's really not a lot of, there's no grass time, as Doug likes to call it right now. Yeah. So as long as he can get through this protocol healthy, quickly within that, and I'll let you spell it out there. I know we have the language there.
Yeah.
It's not like he's going to miss that much, if anything, really.
Right. Dressing the team in person is what he won't be doing. But remember, there are no preseason games. You will not have padded practices until August 16th.
Right. So
the way it works is the language is this: following a positive test, but the person is asymptomatic. 10 days have passed since. So to get back into the building, this is the language: to return to the facility. 10 days have passed since the initial positive test. Well, that certainly has not happened yet. Or 5 days have passed since the initial positive test, and that person receives 2 consecutive negative PCR virus tests within 24 hours apart within that 5-day period. So he's not been able to do that yet. So it's going to be more than 5 days. But as you said, as long as he's back, particularly for the padded practices, they'll be fine. But the issue that you get is they cannot have a spread of this thing, because Doug, according to ESPN, contracted this virus outside the building. Mm-hmm. That is a concern. Now, again, in a positive way, he didn't get it, assuming that report is right, from someone else in the building, but he brought it into the building. Who did he come in contact with? Contact tracing, Geoff, is very important.
Yeah. Listen, I think there's 2 downsides to this. One is obviously Doug's health. We wish him the best. We hope he's going to be okay. It's very good news that he's asymptomatic, so that's a good start, and hopefully everything's fine, right? The broader downside, Adam, is that, man, I mean, Jeffrey Lurie thought he was doing everything the right way and then some, right? I mean, he had the coaches and the staff be in the area on July 10th, okay? Not even doing anything yet. And he had them there.
And that was your report. Ago. Right. That was your report on our show exclusively, that he would have, it was a weekend. Wasn't it July 10th a weekend, a Friday?
I think it was, I don't remember.
Friday, yes. Yeah, I was actually in the Outer Banks. Yes, it was that Friday, which is, was that a week before they were supposed to report, Geoff?
It was. And then they were supposed to have, and they did. They reported July 10th. They had their first round of testing. This is talking about the coaches and the staff on July 17th. And then because they were supposed to be quarantined, July 10th for quarantine, then testing, and then, continuing to quarantine and test like that. So the Eagles were as out in front of this as they felt as they possibly could be with their coaching staff. You never know what the players are flying in from everywhere, but at least with the coaching staff. And, that, and the irony is, I think Doug Pederson in his Zoom conference call, Adam, said he felt as safe in the NovaCare complex as can be. And how ironic would it be that he might have brought it in now to the NovaCare complex. So it's just, that's the downside, is that as we see what's going on in baseball, right, as we see football trying to go navigate the early stage of this, and a lot of players opting out and a lot of players already going on the COVID list, that this thing is going to be unpredictable and it's going to be difficult. And thankfully it's happening for Doug now when nobody's doing anything, but who says it can't happen to him again or anybody else, in 3 or 4 or 5 weeks? Let's say it's Jim Schwartz or anybody, it's you just don't know. And that's going to be this whole season.
Yeah, and by the way, every single NFL team has the emergency list of who takes over if the coordinator is unable to work or the head coach. I've talked to countless amount of teams who've said, "Here's our plan." So it's clear DUCE STALEY, who's going to lead off our show tonight when we talk about the talks that the coaches had with the media. I had one assistant Eagles coach tell me that he thought Deuce would be a head coach because he has such command and players flock to him, and everyone respects him so much. And the Eagles made sure when they retained him. They make sure they retain him off of Chip Kelly's staff because they thought he was a special assistant coach. And here you go. There's a reason why he got that title. This is why, typically, as we said earlier before we move on, it's for money. But there are certain circumstances when you need someone, let's say a head coach, by the way, wants to start looking at a different part of the team and goes, you know what, I want to hand this off to you. I want you to handle this. Well, here you go. And this is what's going to happen going forward.
Yeah. Adam, we're going to get asked about it. So before we move on, I do want to just hit it right now. Okay. We've already probably been asked about it. I think we have. People are going to say, they're going to ask us, don't you think the NFL should consider going the bubble route the way the NHL has and the NBA has? I haven't talked to you specifically about it, but I feel like we're going to be on the same page. I don't see how the NFL can find a city with enough places for people to have practices all week long and then games. Like when you play on an NBA basketball court, you need like 10 minutes to clean it up before you have another two teams get on there and play. When you play on a football field, practice on a football field, it gets chewed up, it gets messed up. I just don't know how you find even two close cities that have enough amenities, enough resources, enough football fields, and everything that goes with it to have the NFL played in a bubble.
Yeah, there's been no talk of it. It's been shot down by the NFL. I think Dr. Alan Sills talked about it. He's the NFL's doctor. I guess he was asked that in a media call, and he said he thinks it's almost like a bubble because basically the protocols are incredibly stringent in the buildings. Okay, there, as one coach told me with another team, he said there's, I can't remember the exact example he gave about getting it. Like you would have had a better chance of like falling down than getting the virus in their building because it's so clean. Every building's the same way. You have to wear, let me get into that before we move on here. Cause I failed to bring this up. I've known about this. So I might as well bring this up. So I've talked to so many coaches. Here's how it works. When you're in the building, mask everywhere. Even in your office, the only time you can not wear your mask is if no one's in there. Now, you also have to wear a tray. You have to wear a sensor. The sensor is to be worn because of the proximity to everyone else. If you're within 6 feet, that sensor is going to go off to warn you, hey, move back. Make sure you distance properly. All player personnel people in the building must wear it. All coaches have to wear it. And now there's special rules that you have to have off the, like when you're on the sideline. But this goes to what I was just saying a moment ago before we move on here, Geoff, that the protocols are so stringent in the building. And then Geoff, by the way, Geoff Stoutland talked about it in his media briefing. We're going to get to that in a minute. But when we talk about what Stoutland was talking about in terms of football, but I just wanted to mention, he said that, like, I think it was Stoutland who mentioned that, or Dave Phipp. I thought it was Stoutland. But anyway, it was one of the coaches who said that basically, hey, if you see one of the guys not wearing it, just, we remind each other, hey, make sure you have it on. And right. I'm just telling you, you don't want to say impossible. Obviously, anything's possible in life, but it'd be very difficult to get it in the facility.
I would think so. The question I would like both of us to look into and answer for our next podcast, perhaps, is what these next few days, we know DUCE STALEY's in charge, but what is it exactly he's going to do that Doug can't? Because right now most things are done remotely and via Zoom anyway. So it'll be very interesting to
call plays.
I mean, like nuts and bolts though, but call plays, but they're not practicing either.
No. So, but they can do walkthroughs.
Right.
Obviously, Doug he's gonna outline with DUCE and Press Taylor and Rich Scangarello. It's real simple, and DUCE will help in that. Obviously, he'll help. He's going to facilitate it. That's really his job here. But the big macro thing is he's going to have to address the team. Hey, Doug's not here. Obviously, Doug, if it's a team meeting, Doug could speak and they could blow it up on a big screen in the auditorium. Geoff, you and I have been there about 50,000 times in the auditorium in NovaCare. Yeah. But on the field, unless you're putting a big video screen and Doug's talking to him, it's going to be Deuce addressing the football team.
Yeah, and of course you sympathize for Doug, but there is a part of me that's excited for Deuce to at least have an opportunity.
Of course, yeah, he
to do what he wants to do.
He does.
Yeah, he does
sure.
deserve it. So
and good wishes to Doug. Really,
yeah, and I think you and I will be able to get kind of an idea of how it went with Deuce, for our next podcast or two.
Sure. Yep.
All right, before we move on, I want to tell everybody, Adam, we got to let people know about our new partner that we're going to do some really cool stuff with throughout the season. We're teaming up. Inside the Birds is now teammates with Philly's own Stateside Vodka. Stateside is the fastest growing craft spirit in Pennsylvania and the first vodka on the market to actively hydrate the consumer with an electrolyte composition. I mean, you're drinking and you're also getting electrolyte composition.
I like that.
How great is that?
Feeling better. Yep.
So did you know that they're headquartered in Old Kensington, Pennsylvania? So it's a hometown distillery, and it's 7 times distilled, certified gluten-free, and top-of-the-line premium vodka. You guys know that we love supporting Philly and locally owned businesses, which is why we're really excited to be partners with Stateside Vodka. And so the next time you're thinking of buying like Tito's or something else, Tito's, which is, by the way, operated down in Cowboys country in Texas, just think to yourself, hey, I'm an Eagles fan. Let's celebrate. Let's support a local business in Philadelphia here.
And by the way, they have local delivery and pickup service, which I absolutely love. So, look,
awesome.
they're a Philadelphia-based company. New Kensington, where New Kensington,
Old Kensington, not New
Old Kensington. Yeah. Kensington's the only one I know. But it's awesome. So, Geoff, what else you got there?
Well, I was going to say, there's just no better vodka than Stateside. It's award-winning, Philly-produced, like we said. So go to statesidevodka.com for 10% off the best vodka out there. Use the promo code BIRDS on pickup or delivery. Yes, they will, as Adam mentioned, deliver to the counties of Philly, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, Bucks, Westmoreland, or Allegheny. So supporting Stateside is supporting Inside the Birds, and we've got some cool things cooking with a fantasy football league for the ITB faithful that we're excited to kick things off with in partnership with Stateside. Nice. So remember, the promo code is BIRDS. You get 10% off Philly's own Stateside Vodka. All right, let's talk about it. DUCE STALEY, not only the head coach interim, as Doug is away with COVID, but he did have a meeting with the media. This is prior to the announcement on Doug, and he was asked about the running backs. And look, I thought he made it as abundantly clear, maybe even more so than you and I could have made it in our many podcasts where we've said Miles Sanders is the man and there's really no committee anymore. I mean, Adam, he said the words, like, just give him the ball and go. I don't think we even need to monitor his touches.
Yeah, so let me just go back to my report back in, I didn't even think it was a report, but everyone made it one. It was in March, I think. And according to 2 team sources, I'd asked, I said, hey, it was before the start of free agency. I said, hey, what are you going to do about Jordan Howard? If he doesn't come back, he goes, well, then it's going to be Miles. There will be no sharing. We'll sign someone to back him up. And I bounced it off another source that said that's absolutely true. And then I'd reported that Carlos Hyde was the guy that they wanted. Hyde was coming here to back up Sanders. There would be no sharing. It would be a 2-to-1 split on touches. Carlos Hyde doesn't catch the ball anyway. They really wanted an insurance policy. And by the way, Hyde was coming off his best season as a pro, his first 1,000-yard season. And now LaShawn McCoy, by the way, Geoff, as you know, is with the Bucks. So that one is squashed, though I could tell you they definitely had interest in him. But the reason why Shady didn't sign here is real simple. Come here to be a caddy, to be a backup, and barely play, or go where you actually might wind up taking the job from Ronald Jones. So that one is pretty simple.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I thought when LaShawn signed with Tampa Bay, if there wasn't a clear indication that the Eagles are not spending money and not doing anything to bring in a more bona fide number 2, that's got to be it. And I suspect that I'm not saying they can't add somebody in camp, but I'm just saying they're not going to be spending $3 to $5 million.
No. You're right, right. No, but what I'm saying is if Devontae Freeman would take, I'm just speculating on the number. Let's say $1.5 million with upside to $5 million, only if he gets 70% of the playing time. Like you would reward him because you would only get that obviously if Sanders got hurt.
Sure.
But the bottom line is, you're right. In my report on Hyde, I clearly stated the Eagles are not looking to spend anything more than a veteran minimum. That's it. So you're right. Sanders is the guy, and Sanders is even stronger than Doug Pederson was on WIP. He made it clear there's no running back by committee. But here's the question, though. Okay, let's move this forward here.
Mm-hmm.
So Deuce was asked this question by our local media here in Philly about did they need to sign a veteran running back. He didn't really even bring that up. He just talked about all the young kids, Scott and Killens and Warren. So, Geoff, here's my question. Do you think Boston Scott's ready to be the number 2?
Well, I do think that Elijah Holyfield's going to get a little bit of a look here, too. It could be situational. I think Boston Scott is closer in Miles' ability to be able to kind of catch the ball out of the backfield and do things and also run the ball. I think if they need some tough grind out yards, you remember a couple of years ago, they tried to get those tough grind out yards from Josh Adams, and he wound up being like 0 for 7 on 3rd and 4th and 1. I mean, he was actually the team's leading rusher that year. And if
I know, in 18.
If you give him the ball on first down, he would do really well. But if you give him the ball on what you actually wanted him for, he wasn't able to get it done. But maybe Elijah Holyfield is more that role. But yeah, you raised a good point. If Miles Sanders gets hurt, do they go committee, or does Boston Scott step into that role? Adam, I think that's a question that they need to answer, and they may have in their mind what they think, but I think that they got to let this thing play out and see. I mean, Boston Scott certainly deserves that opportunity to show if he can do it, because he did do it in the limited time he had to replace Miles.
Yeah, he had 2 games where he double-digit carries. One of them was when Sanders got hurt. He tweaked his ankle, and they were blown out the Giants.
Yeah, both came against the Giants.
Right, yeah, you're right. And then, in fact, the game, you could say in the first game that he was pulled, where the Eagles were getting smoked at home at halftime on Monday night, and they got booed off the field. And they were just trying anything, and they put Scott in, and you did a good job. But, I do want to mention before we move on here 2 things on the running back position. Staley was asked about Corey Clement. Man, he was effusive in his praise with Clement. Man, he was. He said he ran into Corey. He said he looked good, and Corey's a guy who could play special teams. We know what he's capable of doing, but it's like a broken record. You know what he's capable of doing, but he's been hurt the last 2 seasons. Both surgeries, one on his LCL, and then he either had a rotator cuff or labrum surgery. I can't remember right now, but anyway, he had surgery. He's fine. He's doing well. His weight is good, I'm told, but he's got to stay on the field. So, Geoff, the question is now with Killens, he is small. Staley talked about him. He loved his tape. He had a great. Deuce was phenomenal. If you folks if you have the Eagles app, or if you want to go on the website, listen to Deuce talk when he talks about Killens and Michael Warren, who we'll get to in a second. He talks about Killens. He said one thing about small players: if you're small, you got to be special. And he said that Killens is special, but he is 5'7" and change, 175, 180, but he's explosive. And Michael Warren, he said, has great feet. So maybe one of those guys, well, particularly Warren though, because they need some size, plays into it.
Yeah, I really like what he said about Warren, being that he almost insinuated that, look, Michael Warren might be big and look a lot different than the rest of our running backs. He might look big and rumbly, but his footwork and his ability to make guys miss is as good as everybody on the – well, maybe not as good as Miles Sanders, but it's surprising. And, Michael Warren's a guy that I know Andrew DeCecco from who, writes for InsideTheBirds.com for us, is very high on, and has said the similar things, is that he understands how to set up blocks. He understands how to move laterally really well. He breaks a lot of tackles. He's hard to bring down. Don't you feel like, Adam, that when you have Miles Sanders and you have Boston Scott, that's what you're really looking for, that complementary short yardage or that banger? Yeah. Whether it's Elijah Holyfield or Michael Warren, I feel like those guys are going to get a really good look.
All right. So so the next question would be, how many running backs could they carry? I looked it up. There have been times where they've carried 5, but that was back in 17 and 18. They're definitely going to keep 4. Now, the question is, with the expanded roster, expanded practice squad. Right, you keep up to 16. So it's Sanders, it's Scott, probably Clement is 3. There's no guaranteed money in Corey's contract, but you got to figure because he's got great special teams value. As Dave Phipp was talking about, he's 3. Killens to me would not be. They don't need a smaller player. Scott is that changeup. Right. Michael Warren, I would agree with you. Now, here's the problem though, Geoff. You haven't seen him on the field. You're only getting about 2.5 weeks to see him on the field. Then you got to make a decision. because remember, padded practices don't start till August 16th, Geoff. So I don't know if they could in a normal preseason and offseason, I'd say, you know what, Warren could be that Corey Clement of 17 in terms of surprising us. I just don't know if he's going to have enough time to do it.
I have a feeling, Adam, that they're going to go start because of these expanded practice squad.
Okay.
That they're going to enter the year with 4 running backs. It's going to be Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Corey Clement. And I have a feeling because, again, the more the more veteran you are, I think the more advantage you're going to have just for what you said.
Yes.
That I think Elijah Holyfield's going to make it as the – now, I know there's a lot of time here, but I'm just looking forward into my crystal ball.
Okay.
That Holyfield's going to make it. But Killins and Warren are going to be both on the practice squad. And I think at some point during the season, if there's injuries or if there's just a lot of progress, I could see Warren especially getting that promotion if needed.
Yeah, now you have to waive him initially, but the way that the rule works is that you've got 2 moves to move him on the active roster from the practice squad, and you don't have to cut them. They're kind of like you recall them, but you don't have to waive them once they're on the 53 for the first 2 times that you do it. On the practice squad. You could bring them up on a Saturday. They play for you Sunday, and then you move them back to the practice squad, but you do not have to cut them first. He doesn't have to go through waivers. So,
or Adam, I was going to introduce a second thing, and maybe you might agree with the second one more, is that it's Sanders, Scott, Clement, and then they wind up signing somebody who gets cut going into the season. And then Holyfield, Killins, and Warren are all 3 of them might still be on the practice squad because you have the room to accommodate that.
Right. So we're going to assume, unless Freeman lowers his price, that he's not coming to Philly. Lamar Miller is 30 years old, coming off ACL reconstruction. High character guy, could handle third down. Now, here's the other problem. Talking to personnel people, teams are not allowed to work anybody out for at least a couple more weeks. So guys like Miller, who's coming off a significant injury, Isaiah Crow is strictly a 2-down back, power back coming from off a torn Achilles. He told me when I talked to Crowell last month, he said he's running, he's doing great, he feels fine. But you how do you sign this guy without working him out? So to me, Miller though makes sense. Bilo Powell I've brought up before. Someone asked me about Marshawn. The one and only. I don't see it.
Do you think the Eagles would be better served signing a guy who gets cut, who's in a camp, instead of some of these guys that you're mentioning who aren't in camp
Good
yet,
point.
So.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we've just outlined that, and that's what the running back position would look like right now.
All right, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about Geoff Stoutland, what he had to say about his offensive line. First, got to remind everyone, download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code ITB for a special offer when you sign up. That's code ITB for a special offer when you sign up only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Geoff Stoutland gave an update on Jason Peters playing right guard, and, of course, talked about Andre Dillard's offseason progress. I got to be honest with you. I didn't expect Geoff Stoutland to, come on the Zoom and say, I'm not sure this Peters thing is going to work out. And I don't know if Andre Dillard's going to get that much better. I mean, you had to expect some of the praises that he was singing on both guys.
It's interesting. So, and we'll get into Jordan Mailata because I thought his phrasing was really interesting, the way he couched it.
Yeah.
Look, we heard what Doug Pederson said. He thought it's an easy transition. We had Todd Herman's on ITV TV, folks. You haven't seen the interview; it's phenomenal. Because he played with Jason, and he knows the player. And he talked about how Jason has short arms. He's actually a great body fit for guard. And Stoutland talked about it. And here's the thing: I've talked to people with the Eagles who've talked to Geoff about this over the years. It was never like a consideration. It was just, boy, Peters, maybe someday he could play guard for us, but never, when very late in his career, but it was never a real serious discussion. It was like, just in passing, you're just passing the time. So I never, when someone had asked us months ago about Peters maybe come back as a guard, I just said, this is what I've heard. They've never considered it. So they really haven't. I mean, if you hear Stoutland never really, all Stoutland talked about is how Peters told him he thought he could play center if need be or whatever, over the years. But I'm going to side with Pederson Hermans, and Stoutland obviously would know better than all of them. He coaches them. It'll probably work. But the big one was Dillard. He did say that he knew for a fact that Andre got stronger, and he said he needed to, which was good that he said that because we knew that. And Trey Thomas confirmed that from his tape study when he was on ITV TV. So, Geoff, it all sounds good, but in a no offseason on the field and no preseason, and we had mentioned a couple shows ago that Pederson's going to have to practice more than he normally would because he's learning a new position over 2.5 weeks, and then the season starts, Geoff. So can this all work, and what do you think?
So which one are you more concerned about? The second-year player starting at left tackle now for the first time inheriting it, or the Hall of Famer who has to completely switch sides and positions? And both of them, to be honest with you, are doing it cold turkey, because I think that game one is going to feel like cold turkey for them.
All right, so I'm gonna give my number, and then I want you to do this. Right. I'm gonna put it on a 1 to 10 scale. 10 being the biggest concern, 1 being the lowest. Peter's concern, 4.5. And the only reason it's even 4.5 is because you didn't get an offseason of the footwork.
Right.
You're going to have to learn it in training camp and the hand usage. The technique is a little different. But because he's smart, he's savvy. The way it was explained to me, Peters in recent years, because he lost some of his reflexes, he does what older veterans do who are near the end of their career. They manipulate their hands a certain way to win. Like maybe you get into you don't let the opponent come at you, where you can just use your athleticism. You may just try to strike them a certain way or use your hands a certain way just to win, because you can't move as well as you used to. So I'm not overly concerned. So my number is 4.5 on the 10-point concern scale. Dillard, 7, because he
7.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna buy. We actually put this out a while ago that Dillard put the weight on, kept his weight up, and apparently he's somewhere around 330, I think. But that doesn't guarantee you anything. That's great. That doesn't guarantee you hand usage is correct. Footwork is synced up. He didn't have an offseason to make sure the hand usage, Geoff, is great and the footwork is great. I'm not concerned about the athleticism. Who could be? He's a freak athlete. He's a great athlete. That he had the best feet at left tackle coming in the draft last year. But Geoff, he's the guy that still has a large learning curve. He was never really in a 3-point stand in college. And this is a concern.
Yeah.
What are your numbers? Give me your numbers.
Well, if I don't want to elude your question, I want to answer it, but
come on, man.
I have a high level of concern because my feeling is
on who?
And I'll get to this. I have a high level of concern on the offensive line.
Oh,
for week 1 against Washington and that defensive front. It's a high level of concern because of what we're talking about. A guy making his transition right guard, and also a new left tackle who needed to show a lot of improvement. But the fact that there's really no training for them, and they're going to going up against a really tenacious front seven. I mean, really tenacious. We talked about Washington's front seven now, and it's really good. And I just think when you have a concern about one offensive lineman, then theoretically you have a concern about an offensive line in general. Because when one guy, you're only in the offensive line, you're only as strong sometimes as your weakest link, because all it takes is one guy to give up a pressure and your quarterback staring out his ear hole and in his helmet on the ground, right? So, I mean, I would agree with you that I'm less concerned about Peters than Andre Dillard, because at least, you know, Peters has played at a very high level for a long time and is smart and can adjust. But the bottom line is this whole offensive line is going up against a really good Washington defensive front, and they're not going to have a whole lot of contact. There's no preseason games. That's a difficult kind of throw them right in the water against those Lions, against Kerrigan, Chase Young now added, Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Montez Sweat, who I thought was really impressive as a rookie. Yeah. Even the kid from Temple, Ioannidis, he's a pretty good player.
Yeah, he is.
That's
very well said.
My concern is just overall in general on high for this offensive line for week 1.
All right,
now, maybe by week 8 things are good, but I'm just saying
I agree.
They start off.
All right, give me a number on Peters, your concern level.
What did you say? 4.5?
Yeah, which is below. You know, the 10 is the highest concern, and 1 would be the least.
And we're talking about just for that for week 1, right? For Washington week 1.
I'm just being,
in general.
Yeah, in general. Yeah.
See, I feel like Peters is probably going to start off a little shaky, but then get a lot better.
I agree.
As the season goes. He's just got to adjust to it.
Yeah.
Dillard is the big wild card. So with Peters, I would even go as high as 6, although I may give you like a 4 on. I'm sorry, no, the other way, not a 6. I mean, I may be at a 4.5 or or a 6 for week 1, but a 4.5 to 4.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. Yeah,
week
one's going to be difficult.
That's what I meant to say. As for Dillard, man, I don't know. You gotta hope for the best. What did you say?
I said 7.
7.
I'm concerned because here's why.
7's pretty high, man.
but here's why. No, but here's why. If he had a normal off season,
right,
to be in the building, working out there on the field, and Stoutland, his coach, would have his hands on him on terms of, here's how we're going to use your hands. It's not like you can't do in the virtual off season, right? Because you're going over his tape, you're showing him stuff, but it's not on the field. He's not being taught on the field. Now,
right.
He will get all the first team reps at left tackle, which he was not getting last summer. Although Jason wasn't practicing a lot, but still he didn't get them all like he's going to get now. That'll certainly help him. But he's only going to get August 16th he's getting 3 weeks of practices, all of them as a number 1 left tackle. That'll help. Mm-hmm. And as you said, and you're right, there's not a lot of contact. That week 1, depending on how Washington and Jack Del Rio wants to run that front, mm-hmm. I assume they're going to keep the 34. Jack has coached 34 before. He could coach 4-3 or 3-4, but mm-hmm. You're right, man. That is a high matchup, very difficult matchup for this revamped Eagles offensive line. That is not going to be pretty, and we'll obviously talk about that. And by the way, I want to remind people, because we're still getting a ton of traffic on it, those off-season shows that we do with Greg Cosell, where Greg broke down the coaching tape of each NFC East team, including the Eagles, and the Washington one, it's great. He goes over their defensive front. He goes over their corners. And he brought up one kid that I was not one defensive back that I was not even familiar with. So make sure you can go to obviously to YouTube and watch the visual pod, or you can go to the pod itself on Apple or however you download your podcast.
So were you surprised by his Jeff Stoutland's kind of, he basically said Jordan Mailata is a new guy or a completely different guy based on years past. And he talked about his confidence level.
Yeah.
And really all they've done is have Zoom meetings. But so I have to assume when you talk about a guy's confidence level in Zoom meetings, what you're seeing as a coach is a guy who has the complete understanding of all of his responsibilities and blocking schemes, and whether it's kicking out on a zone or on a screen or things like that. It's not just, your sets and and the guy across from you. It's a comprehensive understanding of everything that you're supposed to be doing, and then the rest of the line within the framework of the same play.
Right.
Play call.
So think about this. The guy never played football in his life. He's actually drafted because Stoutland, as I understand it, was the one who really pushed Howie, and then it would have been Joe Douglas to do it. Jordan Mailata is probably one of the best athletes the Eagles have ever had on the offensive line. And the guy didn't even know what he was doing in 2018. It was all just by whatever they told him to do, he would do it. And then last summer, I would tell you, last summer being there, and I came home from my camp tour, and I remember going to a couple practices, and I was, oh my God, this kid, God forbid he ever figures it out, because he's going to be the starting tackle for them for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they would move him inside, and then he'd start there. But a guy like this, now he had the back problems. Now what Stoutland did is he did couch it by saying, look, I'm extrapolating what he meant. Yes, he's a different guy. His confidence level is completely different in the meetings, is what his quote was. But what Geoff also added was, look, this is what I've seen in the virtual program. I still haven't seen him on the field. This is year 3 of it. This guy's a project. Mailata is a freakish athletic project. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that's still learning the game. Hand usage is still not natural to him. It's getting there. Footwork is not totally there, but it's getting there. Now, here's my question to you. Let me throw it back at you here. Should they leave Matt Pryor, who Stoutland also talked about? Stoutland did add, I didn't know this, but this is a good point by him, that Stoutland played left tackle versus Jacksonville in the preseason. Mm-hmm. Should Pryor just stay as a top backup guard, Geoff, or should Mailata just be their top backup tackle, or should they sign somebody?
It's a good point. I still think it might behoove them to sign somebody. In fact, I saw Brian Winters got cut by the Jets.
Yeah, he's
and
had
I thought
4
he's
IRs.
been injured a lot, but he's tough as nails, and he's like a good backup kind of player to have. I wouldn't be mad at the Eagles taking a flyer.
They've been. We outlined this in our combine show. The buzzword that I was using from Eagle sources was no more injured guys.
Yeah.
And Marquise Goodwin doesn't really qualify for that because it was really, he had injuries early in his career, but the issues in recent years was obviously because of his wife trying to have a kid and what he went through personally. And to their credit, they've done that. They've gone pretty much away from the injury stuff. So that's why Paul Richardson, I'm told, is not on the radar. Brian Winters has been on injured reserve 4 times in his career. So I don't see that. You're right, though. Winters is not a bad football player, but he's had shoulder issues and other issues. So,
I can understand if they stayed away.
Yeah, but get some veteran there. I would agree with you. I would love them to get a veteran who could play guard and tackle, like Todd Herremans, who played 4 positions in his career, both tackle spots and both guard spots.
Well, I mean, I think that's what they feel they have in Matt, because Matt, it's not like Matt's never played. I mean, we know he's only started 1 game, and it was against Seattle, and that he did decently. But at this point, it's year 3 for him. So, and he can play tackle and guard. And we talked about, as soon as they signed Jason Peters, that Pryor really goes to the role that he's probably best suited for, and that's the big V void of being able to be that swing guard tackle. So I'm okay with it. I mean, I go look at everybody's, backup lineman. Everybody would like to have a Matt Pryor.
It sound just what you said. I think now this he didn't quite say it, but he said it in passing. He talked about Big V and how Matt Pryor could do some of the same things, but he didn't make it clear that he would be a 4-position player, not just 2.
Right.
But maybe Pryor is going to be that 4-position player. He'll be their top backup. He'll be the 6th lineman. And then Mylott will be the 7th, and then they'll go from there for the 8th and 9th, but we'll see. So that was good. I'll tell you what, I'm glad the Eagles did this with the coaches on offense, but tell you what, the big one though, was Jim Schwartz finally got into what we've been waiting for, Geoff, all offseason. And I know you know where I'm going here.
Yeah, and we've talked so much about the offense. We have to talk about Jim Schwartz and the defense. First, got to give a shout out to our friends at PHLSportsNation.com, enhancing the fan experience, covering all 4 Philly teams like nobody else. Follow them on Twitter at PHL Sports Nation. Check out all their coverage at PHLSportsNation.com. They do podcasts. They're fantastic. They are for the fan, by the fan. That's their motto. And it's just really good work. So everybody should check it out. PHLSportsNation.com.
And by the way,
but
just real quick with them.
Sure.
Can you imagine trying to cover the Sixers right now after that debacle against the Pacers?
All I can think about right now, to be honest with you, if you look at it in totality,
I'm so mad.
Thank God for the Flyers, because you've got no Phillies games for a week, right? The Sixers blow their first game back in the restart.
Embarrassing.
And then Doug Pederson comes down with COVID. So thank God for the Flyers. That's all I got to say. I'm sure a lot of people are feeling that way.
No, the reason why I jumped in is because the only good thing is, when I was at ESPN, I was covering the Chip Kelly Chronicles. Tim McManus and I were working together that season. In addition to everything else I was doing, but I was doing some stuff on the Eagles, and I was chronicling everything. I just, what a train wreck it was, and how disappointing that team was at 15. And then you move it to the Sixers. The Sixers are so talented. It just drives me up a goddamn wall. And I've been a Brett Brown defender, almost apologist, but you know what? I'm sorry. This one's hard. You've had time. I don't want to hear it. They're without Sabonis, who's their best player. TJ Warren goes for 50 plus. Are you out of your bleeping mind?
I couldn't believe that TJ Warren scored 50 points.
I'm shaking my head, and I didn't. And there are a bunch of fans who know I like the Sixers. So a couple of them were asking me what they should do. I never advocate for firing coaches, but he's on my watch, man. This guy's got to get it together. This is an absolute embarrassment. I know it's one game, but you had plenty of time. This is not good, man. So
felt like last year when Dinwiddie dropped 40 points on them, and then every time they played a good backcourt player, that backcourt guy rain on them.
But by the way, I'm sorry, it was an away game. They don't play well on the road. Technically, it was at Indiana. Did you notice the ads for the Pacers?
Yeah,
it was like a home game. It was so funny that I was laughing. But Oh, that drove me up a goddamn wall. It was like they had no concept of how to play him. Didn't body him.
Pretty bad.
They didn't make him earn it. Like, what the
no.
Oy vey. Anyway, I'm sorry for going.
That's all right. That was our Sixers soapbox moment.
Yes.
Brought to you by our great sponsors. You'll hear from them right now. All right. How do you like that? We just made a segment for our sponsors that we called our Sixers soapbox. Let's get back to the Eagles.
By the way, it won't end. By the way, you and I are Sixers diehards. It sure as hell is not going to end because I'm just it's funny. Let's get back to the Eagles, but the Eagles, I'll say this: Doug Pederson has it going on as the head coach. Despite I thought he was soft in 16, I thought he needed to harden up a little bit. He did. He got it. He knew in that offseason he needed to get it together. Brett Brown's got to get it together. But as we go back to the Eagles here, a guy that's got it together is Jim Schwartz. And I was very happy, Geoff, that he discussed a subject that we wanted to talk about, but we talked about it months ago. We thought it would go one way, and I think he confirmed it.
Yeah, he definitely did. We were talking about Darius Slay, and he was asked if Slay would travel. And I thought he'd give a really good answer. I mean, people want to hear that Darius Slay is going to be trailing the number one receiver every single time. And Jim said, look, we now have finally, for the first time since he coached Stephon Gilmore, although Gilmore did not really travel that much in Buffalo when Jim was there because he wasn't ready for it, as Jim said. But now he's got a guy who's ready for it, and that's Darius Slay. But he also noted that it changes your defense a lot when you do that. If you have a lot of teams like to put their wide receiver in the slot, the Falcons dealt with Julio Jones a good deal. And if you put Darius Slay in the slot, that means you have to move one of your slot corners to the outside. So you can create a mismatch against the Eagles by having Slay travel against your number one receiver if you put a number one receiver in the slot, because then you have to flex Nickel Roby-Coleman or Avonte Maddox, whoever the slot is, to the outside, and then you're short on the outside. And if you have a good number two, which a lot of teams have, good number two wideouts, you can exploit that matchup there. So it's good, but I don't think we should expect to see it happen 100% of the time.
No, I thought Schwartz he just didn't. Sometimes he could be difficult. I just want to talk about it. He wasn't giving any information out, but he did it. He put it all out there, and he described, as you just said, and I could add a little bit to it. The problem that you have is if you move Slay inside with even if it's taller corner, short corner, doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. If Maddox is their starting corner, he's 5'9" and a quarter. Crevon LeBlanc then would be their nickel corner, would come in, depending on how you do it. If he's basically LeBlanc is going to be more or less in dime, and he's also very short. Oh, by the way, Nickel Roby-Coleman is barely over 5'7". So you've been talking about this actually months ago. You brought up how short their corners are. You're right, man. They've got Sidney Jones has size and Slay has size, but they're obviously Douglas has. But man, I don't know if you want to put him on the field. Schwartz talked about him. They've got some challenges, but I'm glad that Schwartz confirmed basically what we had heard, that the plan was for him to travel. But what Jim said was, look, it depends really. Geoff, it's going to depend on the matchups in a given week. But let me give you, Geoff, my list of opponent receivers. I actually wrote this down because I knew this would come up. Ready for this one?
Yeah.
McLaurin in week 1, who burned them, killed them in week 1. He actually scored in both games, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The Rams are next week. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp is maybe the NFL's best slot receiver. He's phenomenal. Robert Woods is a terrific player. Then the ageless, or somewhat ageless, A.J. Green. Then the Niners, Deebo Samuel. It's going to be very iffy for that game. Remember, he's coming back from the Jones fracture.
Right.
Then the Steelers, Big Ben back. They're a spread offense. Juju Smith-Schuster, the underrated Deontay Johnson. Then, against Baltimore, my guy, Marquise Money Brown, who, to me, Hollywood Brown is one of my breakout players for fantasy. And then my other guy, Darius Slay, who we know and love, and then Dallas and Gallup and CeeDee Lamb and Cooper. Then in Cleveland, OBJ, if he's healthy. Then Seattle, DK Metcalf. Slay better be on him.
Yeah.
Then, oh boy, the Eagle killer, Devontae Adams, who just destroyed them. On 1 foot, he destroyed them. Oh, then Michael Thomas. Then the recently traded DeAndre Hopkins of the Cardinals.
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, Slay's going to earn every cent of his salary this year. But there are games there. There are some opponents that you mentioned, like take Green Bay, for an example, where it makes sense to travel a lot because after Devontae Adams, it's not like Green Bay has a number 2 that strikes real fear in you, like a real good number 2. After Devontae Adams, who do they have?
But you know what?
So I'm okay with Devontae Maddox. Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm okay with Devontae Maddox on that number 2 man-to-man situation.
Sure.
There are some teams that you brought up there, like I think you mentioned Arizona, right? They have DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk. They've got a lot of decent wide receivers.
Right. They're a supreme spread. Yeah, no doubt.
But one thing Jim mentioned that's really important, Adam, is, well, 2 things here. You can actually have your corner travel on the outsides, but not go to the slot so that you're at least getting him on the outside and you'll all right, Nicole, you stay in the slot if he's there. But secondly, Jim made it a point to say after the Super Bowl, after that season, they were disappointed in some of the tells that they felt that they were giving to the offense, right, on man or zone. And when you travel your cornerback against a wide receiver, you're telling the defense that you're in man, right? So it's harder to be a little bit more discreet when you're doing that. So it's just another reason why you can't just expect every single play this guy's going to be trailing the number 1 wide receiver. But he made it clear he's going to use it at his advantage.
Oh, he's going to use a lot. Yeah,
it's been such a lot. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember the last time an Eagles cornerback was assigned to trail a wide receiver and was even decent at it. I know Nnamdi was early when they brought him here, and he was terrible at it.
No, he well, what happened was he played man sides in Oakland, and they wanted him to travel here.
Right.
And then
and Asante was never a traveler, I believe.
Right, he played sides, right? And Juan Castillo wanted Nnamdi to be like the next Charles Woodson. That was an absolute disaster, as you know. But getting back to this situation, 2 things I wanted to add that from our sources last season, which were advanced scouts, they told me that, and you talk about tells, the Eagles were so vanilla with their disguises.
Mm-hmm.
It was wide 9 and nickel. DN would come in. You might move the front a little, but you didn't do anything to the secondary. Everyone knew it was coming. That's why the secondary was atrocious last season. Let's call it like it is. They were bad. It
was bad.
And as Roseman said at his media briefing, he was sick and tired of seeing the ball go over the DB's head. This is the truth. Their secondary was atrocious. They got beat. Yeah. No team gave up more big plays than they did. It was an ongoing problem with Corey Unlin, who's now the D coordinator with Detroit. You can go back to Corey's first year with Chip Kelly in 14.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know they play a certain technique. It's bend don't break. Whatever you want to say, numbers are numbers, facts are facts. And the other thing is, and I knew what you're saying. Like you and I can't remember a time when they played really man. Well, it's not Schwartz's fault that he had corners that weren't very good. Right. That was why he didn't do it. It's like we'd said. There's a reason why Pederson preferred the committee. You know why at running back? Because he didn't have anyone who could carry the ball constantly. That's why.
There you go.
I mean, people use your head. That's exactly what happened. People would always ask us, that's what Doug wants. No, that's not what he wanted. You're a victim of who you're given. So as much as we beat Schwartz up last year, Geoff, it's because he didn't have the players, and now he does. There's no more excuses here.
Now, he said the other side, when Slay is on one side, the other side, he said, was a competition.
Yes.
He didn't really give a front runner.
No.
Obviously, you and I talk about Avonte Maddox being the most reliable.
Correct. Yeah.
I wonder if we could get inside Jim's head, if he's even giving Sidney Jones any kind of benefit of the doubt to be able to win this thing.
Well,
he's on the team right now.
He is. I mean, I'll say this much. If he has a bad camp, he's a guy who could go in late September. Late August when you and it gets in their thinking. And then when it gets to the initial 53, he's out. This is it. He's got yet another reprieve. This is year 4. Okay. I get that he was on NFI the first year and he'll be restricted, as I'm told, next year. If they keep him and they don't extend him, he won't be unrestricted because he was on NFI too long in year 1. But this is it, man. This is why they drafted him.
So what happens, Adam, if Sidney Jones doesn't have a good camp and neither does Rasul Douglas? What do they do? That would leave them literally with Slay, Maddox, and Roby Coleman, and then what?
Well, Crevon's not an outside corner.
No, he's not an outside corner.
And he actually can play safety. Dude, your guess is as good as mine. And Prince, Not Mukamara Smith. I don't know. They don't have anybody else, man. I mean, right now they've got like 8 corner, like 9 with Michael Jaquette. Craig James is like, he was the guy who got thrown into service against Green Bay. When Matt was that was that the game? Well, that's the game with City Jones.
That was the Green Bay game, right?
Yeah, that was a Green Bay game where he actually made the play
at the end of the game.
Yeah,
right.
To help them win the game. But
then later in the year, what you're talking about, when City Jones made the play, it was supposed to be Craig in the game.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So look,
only the Eagles, man.
They got lucky. I mean, look, the bottom line is they don't have anyone. They need another. They really could. It's funny. We've neglected this position a lot. We haven't really talked about it a lot. But they really need another outside corner. I think they should assign a veteran corner. That's the one area where I could live with not, getting to defensive end. The media didn't really talk to Jim about that very much, but we'll get to that in a second. But just to finish this off, man, to me, I think they'd be smart to bring in another corner in.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and I don't know this for a fact, this is what I would call an educated guess, is that they kind of look at that Jalen Mills in their back pocket and say, oh man, if worse comes to worse, if we needed an outside corner, we've got Jalen Mills who could move over there and play it if we needed. But that's like saying, great, we're going back to the player that we really just tried to move away from the outside because he doesn't do a very good job there.
Yeah, I guess.
I guess I'm saying is if Jalen Mills wasn't on the roster, even though he's been moved to this hybrid role, if he was not on the roster right now, I feel like the Eagles would have done something to bring in. I mean, they may not have released Trevor Williams. They had Trevor Williams.
Yeah, I never got
Williams was going to. Yeah,
I never got a straight answer to that. I'll keep checking. But the reason why Jalen Mills is back because Jim Schwartz loves this kid.
Yes,
he's super smart. He's coachable. He's been a great story of Roseman's best draft, which is 16. It'll go in Howie's little Hall of Fame of best moves. That 16 draft was historic. Mm-hmm. And Mills is just an amazing story. He came back from the Liz Franks injury fairly well. He can't run very well. We know that. That's why he's playing safety. It's a smart move. They think he'd handle it. What Jim said, which I thought was interesting, he said he played with safety technique before, so it's not foreign to him. And he's right that he's
LSU. He did that, right?
Might have. I don't remember, but I do know this. And Jim's right. He's a returning player, so he knows the defense. But right. Geoff, he's still learning this position during no all-season work on the field and no preseason.
Yeah, you want to put a number on that one? Your level of concern?
I would say 5.
All right, that's fair. I mean, to me, I still think that he's not a starter. I do think Parks and Rodney McLeod are your starters as long as both are healthy. And Mills is more of a sub-package hybrid defender. I mean, maybe
that's another question. Right?
Wrong.
I don't even know. Right? We don't. You just brought up the hybrid. Like, we don't know. Will Parks. We don't know how they're going to use him. The word that I got is a hybrid player. Mm-hmm. You're going to move him around for matchups. You're going certain. The one thing I'll say about this all season for Schwartz and Roseman, it's the first time Schwartz could actually say that they've addressed so many needs and they're giving him, people would knock him. And so it's justified because it's the truth. It's a fact. Schwartz has not done a lot we talked about the disguised. He's not done a lot of exotic stuff. Now, part of it, though, is in his defense, they haven't given him enough.
Correct.
So now you've got Jannard Avery, by the way, who they traded for last year. You've got now Mills playing a different position. Will Parks is in there. Mm-hmm. You've got some moving parts here, and you can do that. But, Geoff, let's move to the defensive line. My concern, Schwartz was really not asked about this. He was just talking about, it might have been Zach Berman. I can't remember who asked about moving Malik Jackson, maybe some defensive end. He actually talked about that. Jim said he's done this before previously in his career, that he's moved guys to defensive end. And also, as you know, he mentioned Malik played defensive end a little bit in his career, played in a 34 front DM, but he also played in a 43 for Jacksonville playing end. And he also said, quote, was may do some of those things for us, which is fine. And right now, Geoff, this is my concern. Josh Sweat, if the season started today, is their third end.
Yeah. I'm a little confused by some of the things Jim said. When he said he might look to have 3 defensive tackles on the field at the same time, And of course, you can only do that if
it's a
Malik
bear
Jackson's
front, probably a bear front. Yeah.
Right. And you can only do that if Malik Jackson is playing at an end position. And Malik has kind of been iffy on that himself, whether he likes to do it or not. He's done it, but that's not where he makes his money. He's been a interior pass rusher. He's built like one. That's his strength. You know, you want speed around the edges and you want that power and that burst inside. He's not an edge burst type of guy, but a wide 9 defense is specifically catered to someone who has an edge burst, more so an undersized guy, right? He would be an oversized edge defender with not great edge speed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
so
sure,
I think I don't know if Jim was saying, hey, we have this possibility. He said we've played 3 defensive ends before, so we can play 3 defensive tackles now. At the end of the day, I tend to think he's going to play mostly in pass rush situations, 2 defensive tackles and 2 defensive ends. And I think the ends will be Barnett and Graham. The tackles will be Fletcher Cox, and whether it's Fletcher Cox and Hargrave sometimes, Fletcher Cox and Jackson other times. I'd be very surprised if a 3 DT package was a really big part of what he wants to do.
Well, the bear front is when you go with 5 defensive linemen. You have an add-in D lineman, and
you cover up all the gaps. Yeah,
right. You can do that. That's more of a power front, and you could also, if you want, you could go with a speed package and get Avery in there if he knows what he's doing. You know, this is a big thing for Matt Burke.
Mm-hmm.
I know. He's been. Schwartz said, I guess they've been together on and off since 2004. That's fine. This is the first time Burke's coaching defensive line. This is a big thing. It's a big camp for Matt Burke. To help his career here to get back to being defensive coordinator and potentially a head coach someday. This is a big test for him. For Aaron Moorhead, we'll get to offense in another show, obviously. Mm-hmm. But, man, I think I would not do this with Josh Sweat. To me, he's a part-time player. That knee injury, the reason why teams took him off their draft board, a couple of them I spoke to, are concerned that he's going to be a one-contract player. Now, obviously, this is year 3, and he came on last year. I don't know that he'll get much better because I don't know if his knee would allow him to. He does not practice, as I understand it, a ton, just to make sure he gets through practice. They have a specific amount of practice plays that he gets. And he's got great length, Geoff, and he's talented. But, man, I think you're asking for trouble because if one of the starters gets hurt, Josh Sweat would have to be a starter. I'd rather have Vinny Curry, quite frankly, right now.
Yeah, and Vinny is still not signed. It's amazing.
Yeah, what's going on with that, man?
So there was a time that I was told that he was kind of close. He and the Eagles were talking. He was evaluating things, and of course, we know his half brother died.
Yeah.
So he put some things off. I had heard recently that he was close to signing with a different team, and it just never materialized. Huh. So he's still a free agent.
Yeah.
I keep being told he's still kind of looking at options, and we'll see if he gets into camp. At this point, I think he gets into that situation where maybe you just, you wait to see where your best opportunities are. And it could be deeper into camp. Somebody loses, guy goes on COVID list for a while, or guy just gets hurt and you feel like you've got a better opportunity because no matter where he goes, it's going to be on a 1-year deal. But from what I've heard lately, though, I don't know that the Eagles are going to be in on it as much as they once were. They clearly have made it clear that they have a lot of guys, and you heard Jim Schwartz talk about it too, that they've got a lot of bodies at defensive end. And while they haven't proven as much as Vinny, they've got to get the chance to go out there and compete for the job. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, Avery, and they got to take a look at Sharif Miller and Joe Ostman.
Yeah.
All right, so
Sweat,
before we,
as you mentioned, Sweat, and then they drafted the kid out of Stanford who's not likely to make the team, but he is another body there. So yeah, it's a lot of guys.
Let's get to linebacker, and he didn't talk about it very long.
I was laughing when he was what he was saying.
Yeah, I mean, he was talking about he's looking forward to the competition. He mentioned the speed. There's no question they're faster, but the bottom line is, Geoff, we've talked about linebacker, we haven't minced any words. This is one of the worst linebacking cores in the league. I mean, it is what it is.
Right.
Davion Taylor's not going to get on the field unless it's special teams. I think that's pretty clear. Riley's an excellent special teams player. Dave Phipp talked about him at length. Really, he obviously really likes him. Dick Riley is going to be competing for a starting job on the outside. T.J. Edwards, as you pointed out correctly in our last show, really is a 2-down linebacker. And quite frankly, they really play base. So it might be a one-down linebacker.
Yeah.
And Jatavis Brown is a guy who's got experience, who's could flat out run. but he's undersized and had an injury history. So,
yeah.
And Sean Bradley's a special teams player. Dante Olson, you hope, is a backup Mike. This is not a great group, and this is where I struggle looking at this defense.
Yeah, and I was laughing because if you counted up the number of times Jim said in his response about linebackers, said something about speed and their speed and how much speed they have, you would laugh because what else would you – a coach is only going to say positive things, and outside of speed, what else would you say about this linebacker group?
I mean,
there's
Edwards,
just not much there. Yeah.
I mean, Edwards could tackle. Brown has actually put some good tape together, but it's been a while.
All right. Riley is an athletic linebacker. They're all good athletes.
It's ultimately not what you want, but you know where the cap dollars have gone to the defensive line in a major way, to the offensive line in a major way,
right?
To one corner, and that's it. I mean, they're going to live and die with the way this roster has been composed. I still think at some point over the next 2 to 3 weeks, they're going to sign 1 to 3 players, whether it's a defensive end, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a corner, whether it's a running back. I would be floored if they don't sign at least, and I'm not talking about, an undrafted free agent. I'm talking about a real player who could potentially make the team where they're a little bit deficient.
Yeah, Adam, I think they do have to address it, whether it's, within the next few weeks or especially a linebacker or by the end of camp and before your real 53 come into play. We'll have to see, because people have said to us, why are we making a big deal about linebacker? The Eagles have never put a lot in the linebacker. And I keep saying, I know that, but they still at least put players on the field, whether it was Nigel Bradham or Michael Kendricks or Jordan Hicks, who are either like, second or third round picks or had played in the league for a few years. I mean, right now they're going ahead with guys who are, Nate Gary's been a backup. He's not proven that he's even Nigel Bradham.
My bad. I forgot to big up Nate Gary because he's on he's on the COVID list, correct? Yeah. He's on COVID. Yeah. I forgot to mention, but he's been a good story of development, but he's barely an average linebacker, and we're probably being charitable. I'm going by what other people tell me around the league who watch the Eagles tape.
Correct.
I mean, before we get out of here, I just want to back up what Geoff said. It's not like we're trying to bash the Eagles. We're not. We're telling you the truth. This is what teams think about him and other players at linebacker. It's a bad group. It's the one area where they've not really developed anyone to a higher enough degree where you could say, you know what, they're good at that strong side linebacker position, or they're good at that weak side linebacker position. Or middle linebacker position. They're just not. That's where it's at.
All right, Adam, that's going to do it for this edition of Inside the Birds, the leading podcast in Eagles Intel. Big thanks to our producer, Hunter Brody. Check out his work on YouTube. It's called Sports Talk with Broads. Check out his podcast that he does with former Villanova basketball star Darrell Reynolds. It's called Processed. And also check out Hunter's work on Twitter at Broads81. Of course, our next podcast, I think we'll have a little bit more detail on what's going on with the players and the coaches now on the COVID list and how things are running. And Adam and I look forward to joining you again in a few days. And as always, we thank you for flying with us inside the bird.